There are so many heroes in this game. We're almost at 1,000 at this point, and I'm pretty sure we're going to reach it by the end of this year, if not earlier. And with a plethora of heroes in the game, some of them are going to be more uncommon than others, some just completely unobtainable at this point. And after thinking on it, I thought it would be really fun to look back at all the rare heroes that we have in the game, some that are just completely unicorn at this point, which is basically non-existent, and some bits of trivia sprinkled in. So let's look back at heroes overall and discuss some of the rarest heroes in the game. Starting with the Asker trio, which you do get for free and everyone has them and you can't get rid of them. But for newer players, you get them at 4-star rarity. Before that point, they had them at 2 stars. So if you had an account prior to the update where they made all the Asker trio units 4 stars on debut, then you're one of the earlier adopters of the game, which is really cool because you also got a 2-star Virion with it, who technically isn't rare because you could get him on the weekly rotation along with a bunch of other heroes that are 2-star availability and 1-star availability. They can be rare on their own because they're the only copies of the hero that you're going to get at that rarity, but you could always merge down and have them still be like a +10 1-star yada yada yada. Or if you sent them home or promoted them, then you're never going to really get another version of that. That being said, you can't say the same for another specific hero, as they were never on the rotation, but they did have a 2-star copy given out through the March 2017 quest in the form of whatever they wanted you to do. And your reward was a 2-star Drog, which you could never really get outside of that quest, which I don't think anyone's really hurting for. But for those who still have that 2-star Drog, which I don't think many people do, and if there is somebody that does have it, then it's a really, really early adopter of the game, let alone if they didn't send it home or promote it. He's arguably going to be one of the rarest units in the game, not only because you had to be an early adopter of the game, but you also had to partake in the quest and complete it, which plenty of people might have done, but there's no telling how many people still have that copy on them, especially around the time where they didn't have the manual feature or the reserve feature. So once you ran out of slots, you were really incentivized to send stuff home. And lastly, when it comes to the rarity aspect of it all, there is a 4-star Takumi that any new player can get at this point because they were swapped out for Virion alongside the 4-star Asker Trio update, but it is the only 4-star copy of a Takumi that you could ever get, which chances are you probably promoted him or you used them for close counter, which you still have to promote him for, and it's still not going to be as rare as the other characters mentioned, but it is the only 4-star Takumi that you can ever get, which is why I did want to include it on the list. Although outside of the units that were accessible at the time, or still are at this point, aka Takumi, I did also want to talk about rarity in some other sense, whether that was with the 4-star Halloween Henry, Larum, or the Android promotion when it came to this game. And starting with the 4-star Halloween Henry, this wasn't something that any player can just get through the game, but it was something that you could find on the Learn with Sharena site, where for a time they did have a 4-star Halloween Henry just plastered on the site. I tried looking through the site again to see if it was still there, and I couldn't find it, but because the internet is the internet, there's plenty of records to go by, including this photo, which led to a lot of speculation as to whether or not they are going to change how you get heroes in the future. They were mostly wrong. I mean, I didn't blame them for speculating, but it's funny looking at it now because now you could still get these technically at a 4-star rate, you know, this 4-star special rate. Nevertheless, this wasn't something that you could get in the game, but I wanted to mention it anyway because it was really interesting at the time. Otherwise, there was the Android promotion for Fire Emblem Heroes. I remember when it came to Nintendo and their mobile games, they didn't have everything on both platforms on the same day, although I think that only really applied to Super Mario Run. Still, during the new period of the game launching, there is a cross promotion where you could get a 4-star Corrin. And while this isn't anything significant nowadays, or maybe it wasn't too significant back then either, they did do physical Google Play cards. They had Corrin on a Google Play card and you could buy it and you could get a Corrin with it, which was, I think, the only time they ever did something like that. Unless you want to count the one time they did like a live action thing for COIL, but I don't really think that was the same. Otherwise, there is Larum herself. Larum isn't exactly a rare unit. You could always get her through a random summon on a colorless orb, or you could wait for her to come through on a revival. However, the reason I want to put her on this list is because when you're filling out your hero catalog, it is impossible to find her through PvE content. Not only because she never had a story chapter, you know, with stuff like Igren, and Percival and all of them, they never had a main story chapter, they never had a paralogue, they didn't have any of that. They just had the banner. And while you were able to run into the other 3 units, the reason why Larm was so infamously difficult to find was because she was a dancer. And with the system intelligence systems put in place when it came to their game, you aren't able to run into any single dancer through PvE content. That's probably why you never see stuff like an Olivia or an Azura or anything. Because if they have dance or sing or anything of that sort, unless they're through the main story, you're never going to run into them. And because Larm didn't have any main story chapter or paralogue to go off of, you were just never going to find her to begin with. And as far as tidbits go when it comes to this game, that was really all I could remember or find. Although if there were some stuff I missed, please let me know, because I'm sure I probably missed something. Following that, we have the Hall of Forms. And Hall of Forms is that weird gray area for me, because technically any of these units that run through Hall of Forms are going to be rare in and of itself, because they're the only way you can get a blue border on them. However, the reason I wanted to bring this up is because they recently started doing the revivals, where they started out with Tokyo Mirage sessions. Because of that, they ended up skipping a fair amount of Hall of Forms, ranging from the initial Reinhardt Olin banner, you know, the ones where they got alts that heavily outshone Leaf, but neither here nor there, all the way to the Edelgard Dimitri Claude holoforms, where approximately 9 holoforms were skipped over. And for what it's worth, if a revival does fail in the holoforms Twitter polls, then they're never going to get revived anyway, meaning that they could still fall into this criteria. And because of that, the list can just continually grow and grow, and it will grow because some are just never going to get reran because that's how the system works. But again, you could still argue that every forma is going to be rare because once they do rerun, that's the only other opportunity that you can get them with a blue border. And holoforms, again, is one of those weird areas, but they're still technically rare in and of itself because you can't get the blue border otherwise. And before closing off this video, I do want to bring mention to some units that used to be rare, but are no longer rare because of new changes in the game, including, but not limited to, Duo Ephraim, where prior to the pool update where you can summon him as a 4-star special or you could get him on a revival, he was basically impossible to get until they either decided to put him on a banner one day, or if you were a new player and you had the starter Hero Fest where he was there. That being said, for the longest period of time, that was the only way you were able to get him. And if you couldn't get him at that point, there was a very low chance that he was ever going to be available. It was a very weird instance because it was when they were first introducing stuff like duos and harmonics, although harmonics came a bit later with the likes of Marth and Mia. They really started kicking off duos around the end of 2019 with Halloween Hector, but it didn't seem like they had a complete idea on whether or not they wanted to make them fully seasonal or they wanted to mix them into newer banners too. Nevertheless, they did end up putting Ephraim on a normal heroes banner, but because they felt that he was overpowered comparatively to a lot of the other cast, they ended up forcing him out of the normal pool, which was very unprecedented at the time. Still, it's something that we are currently seeing now with rearmed units where they follow a similar route to Dual Ephraim. It seems like they feel that they shouldn't be in the normal pool, whether that's because they're better than their contemporaries, although I would highly disagree with that, except for maybe like Grima, but again, neither here nor there, or because they have insane value as a unit, meaning that you can basically get a 2-for-1 special with them. You can inherit whatever they come with, and you can still keep the unit, which has incredible value, but they felt that it was too good for them to keep in the normal pool, which I don't really agree with, but this is intelligence systems. They're going to do another dual Ephraim until they decide that they can be in the normal pool again, or on regular revivals. And because of that, there's no telling when any of these units will ever come back. There's always going to be a possibility that they could show up on a random banner, or they could go on a revival banner through the Forging Bonds, but there's no guarantee on that. And it's really just going to be one of those instances where if you don't have the unit, there's a good chance you may not get them for a long time. Other than that, there were the early Grand Hero Battle and Tempest Trial units. Prior to the November 2018 update, there wasn't a Grail system to go off of. And while they did eventually add a good amount of characters through permanent Grand Hero Battle parties or revivals or just a permanent rotation, a lot of the Tempest Trial units were basically one and done. Although they did have a Tempest Trial special or whatever they called it, where you could get a good amount of the Tempest Trial units through there, a single copy, but it was still a fair amount of units. I think it was like 7 or 8. But at the time, those were extremely limited units that no player could really get unless you were there at that moment. Although eventually they did add the Grail currency, which was a really good update when it came out, and it's still really nice to this day. But because of that, the highest merge character that you could get through a Tempest Trial or Grand Hero Battle setting was Masked Marth. If you played every single Tempest Trial to completion, you could get 9 copies of Masked Marth, which was basically your freebie Lucina Build-A-Bear type thing. They had the same stats and the same weapon, but the kicker was that you just had to build them from scratch because they only came with their weapon. Still, at the time, if you were able to get all of them, effectively having a +8 Lucina was still really, really good. Although that only applies with the Tempest Trials. If you want to talk about Grand Hero Battles, Female Robin was able to give you 7 copies. However, she is tied with Narshian, who had 6 copies given out at the time. But the reason why he's tied was because during a Twitter poll on Nintendo's Twitter, they were doing a poll between the White Wing Trio and Narshian to see who would want to enter the game for free, just as a free copy. And Narshian ended up winning. And if you were able to get it through that means, then you could have just as many copies of Narshian as Female Robin. And really, it wouldn't be until the Grail shop opening up that you could just max them out to +10 and all that stuff, which was really great. Although now they're also doing Resplendent Grail Heroes starting with Aversa, which is pretty cool. So it's also going to be, well, not cheaper. You got to pay money for that. And that's about it when it comes to rare heroes in Heroes. I am curious to know if you have any of these heroes left over. I'm sure you could still grab a Narshian or Robin or all that stuff. But if you have something like a Forma Finn or like a Brave Roy, or even something like 2-star Asker Trio, let me know down below. And if you want to see more videos like this, make sure to like and subscribe. And until next time, I'll see you later.